Hello, welcome back to your mama house.
Hello.
Today we'll be talking about a heavier topic, something pretty serious that we felt like was very relevant, especially now that it's the month of October. I don't know about you, but in October, my heart feels heavy just because, like it's the anniversary month of our dad's passing. And so this year would be the 17th year. And for some reason, like every October, there's just always a lot of feelings, and I just wanted for us to open up the space to talk about grief in general. It can be something kind of hard to discuss, and I feel like it's important to talk about these things, especially any of you out there who may be struggling with that.
Yeah, I do think that October is a little bit more like somber and like it's the end of summer. The warm weather is coming to a wrap. Like things are changing. My stomach is growling. Did you hear that?
No idea.
But yeah, like it does mark a new era for us. Like every time I think of October, I think about when our dad passed, and then I think about the things that our family went through, and then it naturally takes me through like the different stages of grief. So,
Oh,
yeah.
have you been processing anything recently in regards to grief in general? It doesn't just have to be like our dad, but like anyone, because grief is, it's a lot of things. It's not just people who have passed away, but even people who are living and are no longer part of our lives.
Yeah, I think grief is a heavy topic. I think when we think about grief, we think about people who we've loved and lost.
Yeah.
And I think in my older years, I also think about like the people that I've encountered and then also have had to walk away from. So that is grief in itself. Grief looks different. It's not always
That's
like
true.
the loss of someone physically. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's walking away from someone, choosing
That's
to
true.
walk away from someone. Yeah.
I also think of it being like someone you used to be too. Like it could even be your
Yeah.
own self, like a different version of you that was there and now they're no longer there. And sometimes it can be hard to be like to say goodbye to that
Yeah.
person. And I don't know about you all, but like I personally have struggled with goodbyes. I call it abandonment issues, but no, I genuinely do. Like I've struggled with like feeling like people are always gonna leave or whatever, and I sometimes don't know how I managed that. But I think acceptance is just a huge part of that I'm still learning to do.
It's tough though.
It is.
How do
Saying
you come to
goodbye is hard.
acceptance?
You just sometimes I feel like that's the only option. You either accept it or you don't. And nothing against any of you who may be struggling. I struggled for a long time just accepting things. Like, yeah, and I just learned to do it because that freed me. And I felt like when I didn't accept something, I felt like I was always searching for an answer or searching for something. And sometimes things just are what they are. And it's okay if you don't understand. I think I always try to search for like, but why? Why? When sometimes it's just, it just
is what it is.
And I
Yeah.
just had to learn to accept that. I think for a long time, like I struggled with dad's passing. So I was 9 years old when our dad passed away. And it wasn't until college where I was like, okay, I'm going to just accept it. Like I didn't start grieving his loss until like freshman year of college because I was able to really sit with it. And that reminds me of the quote you shared. Like
one?
the one about like I sat with my anger long enough to realize it was sadness. But of course this applies differently. But it's like I finally was able to just feel all my feelings and like understand like it's okay that I don't understand why this happened. And I know sometimes it can be hard because like when you lose someone, you sometimes want to search for the reason. And sometimes you just don't have the reason. And sometimes like for me personally, I had to be okay with not knowing the reason and moving on, and that liberated me. Yeah. But it also made me think a lot about like not just like our dad, but like people who we did love and had to let go of. Yeah. Do you want to talk about that at all? Anyone that you've loved and let go of?
I think I've loved a lot of people and had to walk away from a lot of people too. Because love to me, I know you and I have talked about this often, where love is not possessive. Love is liberating. Love is free. It's like I want you to be wherever you feel free. Like I don't want you to feel like your love is under confinement here. And so I think like when I think about love, I think about like embracing a flower instead of picking it. And so like I mean there have been many times where I've had to walk away from people, and whether it is love for myself or love for the other person. Love is not possessive. I don't need to have you to love you.
Yeah.
I can love you by choosing to okay, I respect and appreciate that this is how you are best to be loved, which is away from me.
Well, that is so hard. How did you come to that decision? You just, like, how? Especially with someone, like, you really loved.
I think when you really love someone, you just want them to be where they're happy at. Whether it's with you or without you. And it reminds me of, like, I think I was going through it and I had told someone, like, I love this guy so much. I just want him to be where he's happy at. And, like, one of my girlfriends were like, yeah, that could never be me. I don't want him to be happy if it's not with me. Which I also understand. Yeah. I do understand. But I'm at a point where it's like, I've held on to people who I've loved and they weren't happy. I want you to go where you're happy.
I feel like forcing someone to stay, you just can't. Because then what if they're miserable? They're not willingly choosing to be there. Yeah. And it also makes me think of, like, God's love for us. It's like he loves us, period. There's nothing that could take you away from that or separate you from it. But it's like you also get to choose if you want to love God back. He's not going to force you to.
There's that free will. That's the power of love. It's that, like, I'm not forcing you to love me and I'm not going to force you to stay.
It's like I choose to love you.
The door is open.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's up to you. It's like love is free. Love is a choice. And sometimes the choice is clear, is that, like, I have to walk away. And, oh my gosh, there's this quote where it's like the final act of love is grief. And that's a tough one because no one teaches you how to prepare yourself on how to grieve.
Who wants to say goodbye?
Yeah, I've really struggled with that. It's hard.
It is hard.
Whether it's like saying goodbye because someone passed or saying goodbye because you're choosing to walk away or someone walked away from you. Yeah. It's not easy.
Or goodbye for your own, like, boundaries and self-respect because of something they did.
Yeah. Sometimes people hurt you and the best way you can love yourself is to walk away. Yeah. And that's hard too.
That is hard. It's not easy.
You and I have both had to do that.
Yeah.
Like, how did you navigate that?
Having to say goodbye? Because of something
because
they did?
Of love for yourself.
Yeah. Well, it's like you could still love them. It's not like just because I walked away doesn't mean I don't love you. There's still love there. It's just like, but I love myself more and enough to walk away from this because I love me and my healthy future lifestyle more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think oftentimes, like, when you leave toxic relationships, people think you just don't love them anymore. But it's like, nope, I still love you and care for you, but I'm choosing to walk away because you didn't love me, or it's just not what I envisioned for my future or want. So how did you navigate, like, loving someone and because of your own boundaries, like, choosing to let them go because they did something?
I think ultimately it comes back to loving yourself. I know some people are going to disagree with me, and that's fine, but no matter how much you love someone, always make sure you love yourself. I think it always stems back from the love that you give yourself. That's what pours out into other people. Yeah. So, like, if you run dry on loving yourself, you're not going to have anything for others. And I know, like, in the past, you and I have been, like, super sacrificial, where, like, we've poured out from our cups until we were dry, and we loved people so much. We didn't have anything left for ourselves. And so I'm at a point where it's like, I got to love myself. And if I have to choose between someone else or myself, I will always choose me. Because I will only be able to love you if I love myself.
I respect that. That makes sense. And I feel like, especially with them causing that pain, they should understand. Like, I get why you have to now cut me off. Like, or I understand, or, like, I appreciate that you chose not to cut me off and you showed me grace. Yeah.
I know not everyone's going to understand with that, because I know a lot of people feel that it's everyone before themselves. But I disagree with that sentiment. As much as I respect it, I think it's a beautiful, humble thing to do, but it's not realistic. And long term, you do a lot of damage to yourself. So I feel like in order to be able to love you to my best ability, I must love myself first.
Yeah.
So if I ever have to choose between someone else and me, I will always choose me.
Yeah.
And so to walk away from someone is to love me. That is my act of love to myself.
Yeah. Sometimes it sucks, just to be real.
Yeah, it's not fun.
Like, especially if you, like, love them and you wanted them in your life. Like, you envision a whole future with them and then they, like, break your heart. And it's like, now I have to let you go, even
And
though
I don't want
to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like you could choose to stay. That is a possibility. But
why did you make
But
me
that's gonna like
choose?
linger in your heart, in your head, like, but you were unfaithful or whatever, you know?
Whatever the case was.
Yeah.
Everything is an act of love, whether it's to someone else or to yourself.
Yeah.
What about you? I know you've had to do that as well, where it's like, whether it's making a hard choice to walk away from someone, to choose yourself, or like out of love for someone, you've had to walk away. How's that been like?
It wasn't easy when I first did it because it was kind of like brand new to me. Because I thought if I love you, I'm going to choose to stay no matter what. But I realized, that wasn't loving to myself.
Yeah.
So that's when I realized, okay,
girl,
I'm going to
been
let this go. So like, especially with like the long-term relationship I had in the past, it was like, damn, I loved him. But I was like, that's not what I want for my future. Like when I envisioned our future, like near the end, I realized I wouldn't really be at peace. I wouldn't be satisfied with this life. My kids wouldn't have the future that I wanted them to, and I wouldn't have what I wanted.
Yeah.
And so I decided to let go because it just wasn't what I wanted, and I think that that's okay. And then ultimately I think later on, I think in the moment it's hard to understand like the big picture, but I think now that I'm looking back, I'm like, wow, that was very brave to do, because I didn't really know exactly what would come out of it. But now that I just had that courage to leave, and then years later I'm where I am, I'm like, I understand now, even though I didn't understand then. And sometimes I may not understand everything now, but I have hope that like everything will happen for my good.
And it will.
Yeah.
I believe that as well.
Yeah.
Grief sucks because like no one really teaches you. There's like no like handbook on how to like deal with grief.
Yeah.
In whatever capacity it is, whether it's like the universe taking someone you love away from you, or you having to walk away from someone. Who the fuck teaches you how to handle that? How to deal with that?
Yeah, there is no right or wrong way to. It's just
you gotta.
You can never really be so prepared. Like our dad passed away very suddenly, and even people who kind of it's called anticipatory grieving. I did a little bit of like research on that, and it talks about like when someone knows that someone's loved one is going to pass soon, like it doesn't make it easier or harder, even if you are anticipating that, you know, like it's hard either way. Grief is just not easy. And I remember when I was struggling as like a little teenager with a heartbreak, and one of our older brothers were like, it's been X amount of months. You should be over it now. Like it should take half the amount of time that you guys were together to get over him. And I was just like, it's not that simple. It's not always like that. It's not gonna be like, oh, well, you were with him for this amount of years, you should be over him by this amount of months. It's just not like that. And like I've been watching The Golden Bachelorette, and I feel like it gives me a whole new perspective on like grief. And a lot of them have lost their spouse. And it's like, it's been many years, but that doesn't mean it makes it any easier. So like, I don't like that society or whoever has put it on us that like, it's been this amount of years, just get over it. Like, no, it's not like that. It's not that easy.
That is true.
Yeah.
Time is an interesting concept.
It is.
You know, I don't believe in time as the concept that we have formed it to be. But like, I have had relationships where it's like 2 months has meant more to me than someone I've been with for 5-6 years.
That's crazy.
So it's like the concept of time is so interesting. But it's been 17 years since Dad has passed.
That is a long time.
How has that been like for you?
It's been okay.
Yeah.
I think, like I said before, I didn't really start processing it until like college. So now it's been like, what, 7 months since? I mean, 7 years, 8 years since. I'm like, okay, I'm just learning to accept it. I think there was a lot of feelings with it. So just embrace your feelings. Like I felt
come in waves.
Angry a lot. I felt sad sometimes. I felt like I missed him sometimes. Sometimes I felt like I even hated him. So just embrace whatever comes your way and like process and try to dig deep about why you're feeling that way. I think that's what helped me. And don't let anyone tell you how to feel. Just feel what you're feeling and try to understand why you're feeling that way. Yeah, like it's okay to cry, even if it's been years. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to miss them. It's hard sometimes. You know, like when he passed away, I didn't know like who he was like that.
Yeah.
And it was like when I became an adult where I understood more of like how he was like. And then that made me really angry. Like I felt like a lot of what he did and who he was not right. It was unfair. That was not okay. So I had a lot of anger that like has harvested in my heart. And then I learned to like process that and let go. But what about you? I mean, you were like 12 when Dad passed.
I was a little older than you, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, deep sigh, because Dad's death, I was a little older than you. So, like, I remember things a little bit differently than you. You were 9.
Yeah.
So, I was like a preteen. I think when I think about grief, I think about like how to handle grief. And one of the first things that someone said to me was when Dad died was, "Don't cry." And that,
I remember
really
that.
stuck with me, and I didn't cry.
Oh.
I did not cry about like the passing of our dad's death or the passing of our dad until like his burial. I think to see that, it was like a really heavy like thing for me. It was a core memory. And so like I often associate like sadness with like the loss of Dad, but it doesn't go hand in hand with crying. So I've learned to grieve, and grieving sometimes is crying. I didn't know that, and I tell a lot of people, you might have already associated grieving with sadness and crying. I didn't, because it was something that I just wasn't, I felt like I wasn't permitted to do. So anyway, I say all that to say like I'm comfortable with crying now.
Oh, that's
but I guess, what was your question again? Like, how did I handle the passing of Dad? It was tough because I was preteen. Like, who teaches you how to grieve?
Yeah.
I didn't know the correct way to grieve.
No one taught us. And it's hard when like family members like, don't cry, instead of like
comforting us.
It's okay, you can cry to me.
I was told
like,
not
let's
to cry,
together.
and I didn't cry because I was such like a textbook like obedient kid. I didn't cry. Which now looking back, I'm like, I definitely had permission to cry. So looking back, I'm just like, it's okay to cry. So now I comfort myself in that way of like, when I'm going through something, it's like, oh girl, it's okay to cry.
It is okay
Girl,
to cry.
fuck that. It's your feelings. Cry.
Cry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Feel your feelings.
But I often go back and forth between like anger with Dad, and then sadness with Dad, and like how he went through a lot, and then I have grace for Dad, and then I'm mad at Dad of the things that like bro, look what you left behind. Like, this sucks. You put Mom through so much. And it also makes me mad at like how Dad didn't take his mental health seriously, and then he was so modest, and he didn't go see doctors, and which is what ultimately led to his death. So I feel so many ways, and at the end of the day, I feel grace for Dad.
It's sad. I feel like a lot of Hmong parents especially don't really take their health seriously. And it's like, that's hard.
It is hard.
And I'm sorry also that you couldn't just feel your feelings. Like, we were told not to cry, and I'm sad that you actually like listened.
I did, because
that's sad.
I was so obedient. I was like, okay, they said not to cry, because okay, I feel like I have to share this story. When I was picked up from middle school, I was in the 7th grade when Dad passed. It's so funny. It was Friday, October 12th. I had a school dance that day. And
I didn't know that.
I remember there was a part of me that knew, like, I'm not going to this dance. I'm not going.
Wow.
I knew it.
It's like future you was like kind of telling you, like,
this is not happening. You're not going. And so I was in like 3rd period. It was math class. And like they said on the overhead, it was like, return, you got to go to the office. When? Go to the office. And I'm like, I fucking knew it. It was for me. As soon as like the intercom went on, I was like, this is for me. I heard it. I started packing up all my stuff. I went down to the office, and I see this aunt that like I hadn't seen in years.
Yeah.
And so she's crying.
She was crying when she picked you up?
She was crying when she picked me up.
Oh, you were the first child she picked up.
I was the first one. I was the first kid to know.
She told you in the car before us?
She told me in the car. And
okay,
so I get in the car, and she was just crying in the car.
Oh, that's hard.
So for perspective, my school, I was in middle school, you were in elementary school. Our school was like maybe 2 minutes apart. So close. And so on the ride from my middle school to your elementary school, she told me like, hey, your dad passed away. You need to be strong for your siblings. Don't cry. And when she told me that, she was crying. And I remember thinking like,
wow. Why they be saying
this is
stuff
so
like that?
unfair.
That was weird.
But I was so obedient. I listened to her, and as soon as she closed the door and walked out, I started crying.
Oh, you did?
I did. I cried.
Aww.
But when you guys came into the car, I did not cry. Because she told me I had to be strong for my siblings.
I noticed you did look sad. Like, your face was pink.
Yeah, bro, I was sad.
Aww.
I was so sad.
Aww. It's okay.
Because there was
to
a part
sad.
of me that knew, like, oh, girl, our life is never going to be the same again.
Yeah.
Like, I knew it. But I was just like, okay, but she told me I couldn't cry. And so, like, I was such, like, an obedient kid. I didn't cry. But I remember we got to the house and, like, our home was, like, taped up in police tape. And I remember you cried. And there was a part of me that was, like, jealous. That, like, you got to feel your emotions and I couldn't.
Yeah. I remember, like, it was such a weird day. It was a Friday. It was gloomy.
It was a weird day.
And I had a substitute teacher that day. I remember it was so weird. And she got a phone call. And she was like, so, go down to the office. You're being called to go to the main office. I was like, no way. Our parents have never, ever picked us up early in their life. Nah, whatever. So I did not pack up my stuff and go at all. I was like, whatever. I just sat there. All of a sudden, I saw my brother running, like, in the hallway, like, kind of like
your older one or your younger one?
Running with the stuff, and he was like, come on, so let's go. I was like, oh, this is for real. So,
really?
Yeah.
I never knew this.
Oh, okay. I guess. And so my teacher was like, again, my substitute teacher was like, pack up your stuff and go. I was like, oh, okay. So I, like, weirdly did it, and then I followed my big brother, and then all of a sudden I saw my little brother with, like, his lunch tray. And then we walked to the van that our auntie picked us up in, and you were in the car.
I was in the car.
And then I could tell something was off. Like, you looked like you had just got done crying.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't really see you cry, but I knew something was off. And then I remember I was like, whatever. I was like a little fourth grader, like, trying to get my little brother's lunch. And we were arguing over that. And you were yelling at us to just, like, stop and just
I remember you guys were, like, arguing over, like, our baby brother's lunch. And I remember turning around and being like, you guys don't even know what's about to happen, okay?
Yes, you said something like that. And I was like, what the hell is her problem? I was like, okay, whatever. And then we got to the house. And then
it was taped up.
It was taped up. What was weird is the front door was open. We never used the front door.
We don't use the front door.
I realized something was wrong. And then I saw relatives crying. And I was like, what is going on? And then that's when our auntie said, like, you guys, don't cry. I'm going to tell you guys something. Be strong.
Yep.
Your dad just passed away. And that was... And then I think I started crying. Yeah, we didn't know what was going on. It's hard.
Grief is a tough thing. I that lives in my head rent free. And if it's something that I wish I would have never heard, is to be strong.
Yeah.
I wish I never heard that.
Like, what if we don't want to be strong?
What if we just want to be?
You know?
Yeah.
And I think, like, I guess that taught me, like, to never tell anyone, like, don't cry. I think if anything, that taught me, like, to tell people, like, it's okay to feel your feelings. Like, feel them.
Yeah.
Embrace them. You're feeling them for a reason.
Because if you tell someone to be strong, and that's all they've ever known, they're gonna be strong.
Yeah.
I wanted to have, like, melted and, like, just lost it. I wanted to have done that, but I didn't feel like I had permission to.
Yeah. You know, when we entered the home, we were led to, like, the room where Dad passed, and he was still lying there on the bed. And I remember, like, I think that was the time where it was, like, the time to say goodbye. I feel like I actually was able to say goodbye. Do you feel like you were able to say goodbye?
No.
I
remember you saying goodbye. I feel like grief is hard because I remember seeing you say goodbye. And I think, so one thing, I don't have many regrets in life. But there's one thing that I regret is, like, not saying sorry to Dad. And so I feel like, because he and I got into, like, this really big argument before he died. But you never know when someone's gonna go. And that's why, like, I truly believe in, like, letting people feel how they feel. And apologizing when you need to, because you don't know when someone's last moment is. And I never got to say bye to Dad or to say sorry.
Yeah.
So then I didn't.
But don't hold yourself to that, because he has so many things to also apologize for.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and you were a kid.
I don't feel like I ever got to say goodbye, but I've said goodbye my own way now. But yeah, I always did envy how you were able to say goodbye. I remember that.
I feel like that was maybe my first time saying goodbye. It was really,
Ooh.
it was like, I'm surprised we were given the opportunity. It made me sad because like it was only me, you, and then our 2 other brothers that were able to say goodbye. And I remember the other brothers, they came home from school and Dad was already taken into the ambulance. And they didn't get to say goodbye.
That was tough.
Yeah. I feel like saying goodbye is so important to me for some reason. I think that part of it is because of my abandonment issues.
Yeah.
Saying goodbye is such a big thing to me. Like, I feel like I need to hug someone or whatever because you'll never know what'll happen, like you said. Like, even for our YouTube channel, like, when we play the song, like, favorite song, the piano version, that is to show you guys and give you guys a hint, like, this message is going to end soon. And we'll see you again.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
But, like, that's just helpful for me. I'm at least grateful we were able to, like, say goodbye from being picked up early. I feel like I would have probably had a lot of anger and, like, confusion if we hadn't been able to. Because, like, literally, it was, like, a month until we had his funeral. I would have been going crazy trying to understand what was happening.
I did not say goodbye to his burial.
Yeah. Tell me more about that.
I feel like I had to see Dad be buried. Like, I had to physically see him be put into the ground. I would have never believed it otherwise that he died. Because there was a part of me that felt like, oh, he's still here. It didn't feel real. It felt like a dream. It felt like we were living in a fog. And so like, I had to see Dad be put into the ground, be buried, and then have his tombstone be laid on top. Like, all of that had to happen for me to finally accept, like, you are gone. And so Dad was like a huge, like, it was a very difficult goodbye. But
it was. You were right. And, like, our lives did change forever since.
At that moment, I just knew, like, something's changing. I don't know exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
That was a very difficult goodbye.
It was. And, you know, I feel like just because you say goodbye once doesn't mean it's not going to be easy moving forward. I feel like even though I said goodbye on the bed he was lying on, I still struggled even past that. Like, remember when I would bring up, like, what if he's actually not dead? What if he just left us and went and got married and then...
I thought that too.
I literally thought that. I was like,
I would have dreams.
He probably faked his death. Like, I was so serious. Sometimes I still even maybe believe that.
Sometimes I have dreams and I see him and I wake up crying. I'm like, you're not gone.
Yeah.
You're not gone. But knowing that I seen his body physically be buried, I needed to see that to know that he was gone.
Yeah. And, you know, when he passed away, it was like before we had a lot of like high tech stuff. So we don't have like recordings of him or whatever. And I remember like in college when I was processing my grief, I was crying because I'm like, I forgot how he sounds. And that made me so sad. I don't really remember. It's like I can remember part of it, like maybe his laugh or something, but it's like we don't have anything physical to remember him by. And that makes me so sad and like kind of envious of people who like have at least a recording of their loved one to listen to. Or we don't have any of that. We just have pictures.
Do you remember our first Father's Day without Dad?
No.
So we were at church and they had like, so at our church, you would be if you were like in middle school and up, you would go to service, which is like with the congregation. And for that first Father's Day, we were dismissed to go sit with our dads. We didn't have a dad to sit with. That was really sad.
Oh, what do we do?
Nothing.
Oh, we just sat there.
We didn't move.
I kind of dread Father's Day sometimes.
And the thing is like we didn't even have like the best dad.
We didn't.
So like we're grieving over a dad that wasn't like perfect, but you don't have to have a perfect person to grieve.
That's so true.
Grieving is not just about like a perfect person. It's just to love someone, just to love someone.
It's like even though he was shitty, we still loved him. He was still our dad. What he did wasn't right, but it's just like we still loved him.
And I think some people are like surprised by our love for our parents because our parents are not perfect. But it's like if you have to have somebody who's perfect to love them, it's like
no one's perfect.
Nobody is perfect.
Grief is so interesting. It comes out and it affects you like out of the blue. Like, for example, the other day we were decluttering my mom's stuff, and then all of a sudden one of my older brothers, he pulled out dad's like slideshow from his funeral, and all of a sudden I just started crying. I was like, oh my gosh, I do this thing where I announce that I'm gonna cry. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna cry. And then Arnya was like, oh, it's okay. And then my mom, she got really weird.
Yeah, she does get weird.
Whatever. She was like, oh, like really weird. Like, don't cry. You don't need to cry. Like, I was just like, no, I'm okay if I cry. Like, I remember telling her that, like, no, I could cry. Like, it's okay if I cry.
Yeah.
And then Nya was like, it's okay if you miss him. You know, he's still your dad. And I was like, I don't know if it's that I miss him. I think it just feelings came up after seeing that. I have not seen that video, that slideshow in like years. And I remember like when you guys would be off doing something, I would watch that alone in the house when I would miss dad. And so I have not seen that in years. And so I think like our brother like putting that on, I was like, I thought someone had thrown it away. I have not seen that in so long.
Wow.
So for us, like, I think for me to know that it's still there and like I can still see it whenever.
Yeah.
It's like that's my way that I can like see, even though it's not a video or voice of him. It's like, okay, well, it's still memories and songs that'll help me process my pain. And yeah, I mean, I feel sad that like mom couldn't be there to comfort me, but I didn't expect that. It was just like, well, kind of used to them saying don't cry. But I think I'm more comfortable in my emotions now where I'm like, it's okay for me to cry.
And I think it helps that like you really do encourage like, oh, you're sad, you can cry. It's like, thank you for the permission, because I didn't realize a lot of us were waiting for permission.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's sad.
I feel like I give permission to people in other ways. Like you give permission to people to feel, oh, you're sad, you can cry. And to me, I feel like, oh, no, your voice is powerful, girl. You can say it. So we like permit people in other ways.
Yeah. I know you and some of the other siblings don't do this, but I pre-grieve at times. Like, especially with just having one parent now.
Yeah.
It like, I just can't help but think about like, if mom were to die one day, and I would have to like live through that and grieve that, like that would hurt me so badly. Like I would be so sad. For some reason I pre-grieve. Not so much anymore.
Yeah.
But like it's funny that you guys don't do that. And I guess in some ways that's good.
Pre-grieve? Yeah. I told you about that. I literally just told you earlier about that one time I pre-grieved.
Yeah. Share.
I think I was like maybe like 7 and I was like pre-grieving. Mom was still alive, dad was still alive, and you were in bed. We were sharing a room at this time.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so funny.
And I remember I used to have this stuffed frog toy.
I remember it was so colorful.
I loved this frog. I still love frogs.
It's like this and orange.
Yes. And like the little hands had like beads in it, so it was like heavy.
Yeah, it was weighted.
And I loved this. I still love weighted stuffed animals. Anyway, I was like crying. I was like holding my pet frog. And I was crying, thinking about like mom passing, and I was crying, and mom was on the phone, and she came into my room and she yelled at me and told me to stop crying, to go to bed. I had school in the morning, so I was like, okay, fine.
That's funny.
And so like, I was like, all right, I ain't pre-grieving no more. Yeah, I don't pre-grieve.
Yeah, it's hard. I think about like people who are like experiencing anticipatory grief. I can't imagine like how hard that is.
Yeah.
Like when a doctor or someone professional like tells someone that they only have an X amount of days to live, and you're like their loved one. Yeah. It's really hard to go about that. That's really, really hard.
That is true.
Yeah. Nothing really prepares you for grief. What would you say to someone who is experiencing any kind of grief?
Like any kind?
Grief in general, because it's like a similar feeling where it's like there's sadness there.
I'm gonna say what I always have to say is say whatever is on your heart. Don't let that moment pass you by. If like you feel like you need to apologize to somebody, apologize to them. You see something beautiful in somebody, say it to them. Like don't wait. I think if it's anything about dad's death is I learned that I missed out on an opportunity to apologize to him.
Oh, really?
Despite how many things he should have apologized to me about, to our siblings about,
Mm-hmm.
fact of the matter is I had something to apologize about.
Oh.
And I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it was something so minor, but the fact is that I didn't. It was something so little and I didn't.
Yeah.
And so I refused to go a day like feeling like I didn't say what I had to say. So I just say what it is. Whether it's something so little, like, girl, you look good in that dress, or like those earrings look good on you, or I didn't like how you said this and it made me feel like that. Just learn to speak your truth, because tomorrow may never come.
Yeah.
All we are guaranteed is right now. So if you're experiencing grief, I would say be honest with yourself, with the people you love. Don't take the present for granted. Tomorrow may never come. Yeah.
That's true. And I think like saying how you really feel and just expressing yourself will liberate you and that other person too.
Yeah.
Because that's the truth, and the truth will set you free.
It does.
And I think it's important to add that, like, not only saying it when you're grieving, but just saying how you really feel to everyone around you. Because who knows, like, all of our days are limited. And you never know when it'll be your last day or someone else's last day.
So if like you're speaking your truth all the time, like if I go tomorrow, I know that I said everything I had to say today. It don't matter whether it's somebody else or whether it's you. You just say your piece.
I love this woman was sharing her message on TikTok, and she was saying, like, give people their flowers now while they're alive. Like, don't wait until they die. She was like, write out their obituaries through your compliments to them. And I'm like, I love that. Like, literally give them flowers now, and also like give them their flowers, and like sharing with them what you love about them too.
Because people have so much to say once someone passes, but it's like, while someone is here, what do you have to say to them? Say it.
Yeah.
I think we're too shy. Like, maybe we don't know exactly how to say it, but it's like when you know someone's time is limited, there's like a severity in that. But fact of the matter is, you don't know if tomorrow is guaranteed for any of us. So just say whatever it is you gotta say.
This is interesting. I felt like it actually helped me with forgiveness. I often think, I'm like, why do people suddenly forgive or find it easier to forgive once someone's like gonna pass away? So that made me wonder, like, because, you know, for many years I struggled with forgiving my mom. Like, I was angry towards her. And then I realized, like, wait, her days are limited and my days are limited. Do I want to spend the you know, the final years of whatever we have left being upset at her? But if I do choose to, rightfully so, right? But then I realized, like, oh, I didn't want that. I was tired of being angry. And so that helped me to forgive her.
It is tough.
Yeah.
Grief is also difficult because it comes in waves. Some days it's like, all right, I'm okay. And some days it's like, oh, no, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. And that's totally okay. It sneaks up on you like...
It does.
You just don't know. Yeah. Can't believe it's been 17 years.
Oh my gosh, that's a long time. We were kids.
We've gone longer without a dad than we have had with a dad.
Yeah. I remember being a kid, I literally never thought that that would happen.
Yeah.
And then it happened, and I was like, what do we do from here?
It's a feeling like it happens to everyone but you. That's how I felt. Like, oh no, this is the kind of stuff that happens to other people. It doesn't happen to me.
Yeah, and then it happened to our whole family.
And it shook us up.
And he was so young. It was very sudden, very unexpected.
I also get some anger from that. Like, because our dad passed from a blood clot in his heart, which was ultimately like a result of his mental health. And I'm not mad at dad because, you know, in our Hmong community, we don't really talk about mental health. We don't talk about those types of things. So like, who would ever known how to even think about that? But it makes me sad of how many things are preventable and we just don't know how to prevent it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why we're so like serious about mental health. It matters. And this is also why we want to do this channel, is like we want to give people a space to relate, and you're not alone. I think about dad often in the way of like, he didn't have to go like that. He was so young. Yeah.
It's sad too, because like I know he was grieving during that time too. His mom just passed away, and there was just a lot that was contributing to his health condition.
It was a lot. And again, he was dealing with grief at the time where he was going through all this. Like, nobody teaches you how to deal with grief.
Yeah. So it's so important to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
We stress that so much because it's just so important.
Yeah. Even though it was like, even though this grief, the passing of our dad, affected all of us, we didn't grieve together either.
We didn't.
We never grieved together. Whether it was
we
grandma,
still don't sometimes with us and our siblings. Like, hey, how are you feeling about like with dad passing? We don't really ever talk about that with each other. I think I only recall like a few times on one hand where we've talked about it as like siblings.
Like even the other day when we watched dad's funeral like slideshow, like there was so many, like we like make jokes and stuff, not at like the slideshow or anything, but we're just like talking about certain things, and I'm like, oh, is this us like awkwardly like filling the void of sadness? We don't know how to handle it, so we just like make jokes,
especially our brothers. And that's why you and I were like, I can tell we were sad, and I was like, we'll cry about it later.
Yeah, we'll cry about it later.
Y'all can go downstairs, we'll cry about it later together.
Because I can hate someone or be mad at someone and still be sad about them. I feel like some people are stuck on like, I'm only mad, and it's like that. Okay, I get it, but it's like,
but you know, we talk about like anger is also just sadness. A lot of sadness and pain.
Anger is just a lot of sadness. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation of talking about grief. We know that it can be a lot, it can be heavy, so we always want to encourage you to prioritize your mental health wherever you're at mentally. Healing comes in waves, whether it's missing someone, grieving, being angry at someone that you've lost, walking away from someone who's hurt you, or just walking away to preserve yourself. Whatever it is that you have to do, take the steps that you need to, that whatever it is that it looks like for you, and be patient with yourself as you figure out how to navigate the loss of someone in your life. We thank you for joining us in this conversation, and we look forward to many more conversations with you. Thank you. Hugs.